Well, you can tell the college football season is right around the corner. Dean Legge from Dawg Post here, making you smarter Georgia fan. I did want to go over some of the announcements that have come out in the last week or two about game times and what that's going to mean for the rest of the schedule. So stick with me here. Everybody already knew about the Clemson game being the Saturday night on ABC at 7 o'clock in Charlotte. That's not a surprise. Everybody assumed that was not strange at all. And then, of course, CBS coming out earlier in the month of May to say that Georgia's game with Florida is for like the, I think, 24th or 25th years going to be on CBS at 3:30, Jacksonville, etc. And then you have the two games that we now know as well, which is UAB and South Carolina. South Carolina being a night game in Athens, and then UAB being a 3:30 game. There's a couple of different things that, taken into consideration, all of those things mean. First of all, it means that Georgia has not been selected yet for a digital game, and I'll talk about that more in the future. But essentially, the Charleston Southern game is not going to be on TV. You're going to need some sort of streaming device. You're not going to be able to watch it on your television. So if you're someone that does not have streaming, you need to think about that if you have interest in watching the Charleston Southern game, which is the game before the Georgia Tech game. The other thing about this is, Georgia, and I think maybe Alabama are playing on network the entire time. And my term for network has changed over the years because I include ESPN and ESPN2 in that now. SEC Network, I don't really call that network. So Georgia's playing on ABC and CBS. Those are both traditional. Those are real deal, obvious broadcast networks. That's what it's called. You can pick it up with the antenna. And anymore with ESPN or ESPN2, those are broadly distributed games that everyone's going to talk about. You're not going to have to, really go out of your way to watch those games. But really, all of this in total means you're seeing a program that had as many, frankly, it's a television power. And so this complaining that you hear often from Georgia fans that Georgia plays at noon, they might not play at noon this entire season. I think there's a couple of games that jump out that they could, which are Vanderbilt and Arkansas. But other than that, like the Vanderbilt game is either going to be probably at noon or night. Arkansas, I think that's going to probably be a night game. It could get picked up by CBS. I kind of doubt it. And then Auburn is going to be a CBS game because that's a doubleheader weekend. Georgia will not be the night game there. And there's another doubleheader from CBS along the way as well. But when you look at the totality of this schedule and you compare it to the rest of the league, there's just not a lot of spaces for Georgia to fall off the map. Now, the game in Atlanta against the Jackets, that could be a noon game. Of course, Georgia doesn't have any say or control over that. But it being an ABC game, against Tech, that game more and more has not been played at night. Back in the day, it was played at night in Atlanta. I mean, I remember 2005, 2009. Those were night games in Atlanta, electric games, really. Both of those games were amazing events. But that game, at times, was at night. It has not been at night in Atlanta in a long time. It's not been at night in Athens, I feel like, in a long time. 2010, I'm just going off memory here. But when you look at like Georgia, Tennessee late in the year, that should be a CBS game. And for those of you who are wondering, well, why did the SEC move some of these games around? First of all, there was no what's called inventory at the end of the year. And that's one reason why in 2019 Georgia played Texas A&M the last weekend before Georgia Tech. I mean, the TV networks were paying big money and not getting anything to show for it, specifically CBS. That will be ABC in the near future. So that's why Tennessee is going, where Auburn used to go. And then that gives them the flexibility to stick Auburn with a tougher foe the week before Alabama, which is for them South Carolina. You look at that week before the rivalry week, it used to be terrible. Now you've got Auburn Auburn, Carolina, Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Missouri. I don't, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, I don't think anybody cares about. But all those games at the beginning right there I just mentioned, you have something you can put on TV and you'll be excited about. For Georgia, knowing Clemson, UAB, South Carolina, and then the Gators, of course. I mean, I think you pretty much know Charleston Southern is going to be on digital. The question is what time. That might be a night game, just because Georgia fans have made it clear they do not want noon games, which is interesting because forever the Dogs played at 1 o'clock in Athens, but that was before they had lights. But even then, they just preferred not to have night games. But the ones in the middle of the year, Vanderbilt, Arkansas, those two games are going to be ones that could be early games for sure. Kentucky is the homecoming game for Georgia. Of course, all these games, Georgia has no real say in anything, and you see that. The best example of that is what Nebraska and Oklahoma have gone through. The long story short is this is the 50-year anniversary of their huge game and their rivalry that happened in 1971, and they really wanted that game to not be at 11 o'clock local. Well, their TV partner, Fox, said, we don't care, it's an 11 o'clock game, and that's all there is to it. Oklahoma has really voiced their displeasure, but the reality is that once you take the money, you're not going to be able to really complain. And your complaining is not going to do any good, at least. So, I remember as late as 2005, maybe even 2011, Georgia would ask for certain things, and for the most part, they would get them, for the most part. But anymore, you're really being dictated to by television, and when they're paying your institution something like $50 to $60 million in rights fees, they get to tell you when you're kicking off. Now, Georgia being on the Eastern time zone, they don't get any nutball times. There's no 11 o'clock kickoffs in Athens. There's no 8:30 kickoffs like you sometimes have, in Pac-12 games. I mean, those games are nuts. But at the end of the day, if you don't like day games, I don't see Georgia having a lot of noon games. Charleston Southern, maybe Missouri, but there's just not a lot here. I mean, Vanderbilt and Nashville, that's probably going to be a night game. Arkansas and Athens, Kentucky and Athens, those two games. Auburn could be a noon game at Auburn, but it won't be in Athens. I think that game. I need to double check and see when that double header is for the 2021 season, but it's not. It's not going to be in Athens, so people are a lot less, sort of jumpy about it. CBS has a doubleheader with a noon game on the 16th. So that's the day that Georgia plays Kentucky and Athens. That totally could be a noon game for the Dogs and Cats. But I think generally speaking, now that you know Clemson, you know Florida, and you know Carolina is you're talking about South Carolina, a team that's probably going to win 4 games in 2021. That's a primetime game on ESPN, no less. That shows you the power that Georgia has on television, and they're just not going to waste it. And honestly, that UAB was on at 3:30 on ESPN too shows the power of Georgia. And that's not a great time spot, but that'll get them 1 million. It might get them 2 million views. That's a lot, for any garbage throwaway game. LSU doesn't do that with garbage games. Florida doesn't do that with garbage games. Auburn, Alabama, yes. Georgia, Ohio State, those three, those are really the power schools in terms of they hold an audience. Their floor is only going to be about 2 million at the lowest, even with a UAB team. So, and that's why you wonder why Alabama is on ESPN2 when they're playing Western Carolina. That's the reason why. You wonder why Georgia's playing on ESPN2 with UAB. That's the reason why. Come to dawgpost.com. Let's talk about this more. We've got more insight into the Dogs as we get ready for a very wild recruiting season that's getting ready to ramp up in Athens. We'll see you over on the website.